Hi, I'm Jennifer from Friends of the Lost Coast, working partners with the Bureau of Land Management. In this set of videos, we're going to look at forests, how they work, how they function, how they maintain from one generation to the next. Forests cover 30% of the land on Earth, and they're constantly changing and evolving. And it's not all about the trees. What we need to do is pay attention. Let's take a look. Of all the land on Earth, 30% is covered by forests. That's a lot of trees. How did they all get there? Well, it didn't happen overnight. Redwood forests have been on Earth for 200 million years. The redwood forests on California's north coast have been here for at least 20 million years. That's at least 10,000 generations of trees. Much of the King Range National Conservation Area on the Humboldt-Mendocino Lost Coast is covered by thick, lush, temperate forests of redwood, Douglas fir, madrone, and tan oak. Forests don't just appear fully grown. They have stages of growth just like an animal, just like a human being. Our forests, like all forests, are continually regrowing, moving through every stage of growth to stay healthy, hopefully for many centuries to come. Since the forest is continually regrowing, if we look carefully, we can see every stage of growth that created the forest in the first place. It's quite a process. Every tree starts from a seed or a tiny shoot. Every seed must take root in fertile soil, rich in the materials that nurture the tiny seedling that will one day become a great tree. Soil has to be made. Where does that soil come from? If you compose something, you create something from many parts. You put those parts together to create your composition. Let's say you want to build or compose a brand new house from the parts of an old one. Taking apart the old house could be called destruction, but really, you're just decomposing the old house composition to get the parts for a new one. The same kind of thing happens in nature. Plants and animals live and grow, but not forever. While alive, their bodies are composed of many different types of cells. When plants die, all those cells will break apart and go back into the soil. A tree is a marvelous composition, and to make a new tree, the forest must decompose that tree and start again. How does this happen? What decomposes that dead tree, making parts available for a new one? Forests can be divided into 3 layers: the canopy, the understory, and the forest floor. The forest floor is a great place to witness decomposition. There are many decomposers living on the forest floor, including mites, millipedes, fungus, bacteria, and worms. Each one has a unique role in the process of decomposition. In the forests of the King Range, the forest floor is mostly cool and wet, perfect for all the decomposers. It's not too hot, like a desert, or too cold, like the Arctic. When it comes to decomposition, one group that stands out is the worms. They are masters of breaking things apart in just the right way so those parts can be used again. The master decomposer worms are the Annelid worms. These worms are segmented. If you look carefully, you can see their segments. Earthworms have a huge influence on the health of a forest. These Annelid worms eat stuff that used to be alive and falls to the forest floor, like dead animals, sticks, old leaves, and animal poop. Earthworms also mix the soil layers as they move. This helps bring oxygen to the soil. The roots of plants, bacteria, and fungi all need oxygen, and animals in the forest need the plants. The decomposers build the soil that feeds every living thing in the forest. Eventually, working together, the decomposers turn all the dead stuff into soil, nurturing tiny seedlings to grow into plants and trees. Imagine if all that stuff did not get broken down. Very soon, the forest would be a jumble of dead stuff. Some people think that chopping a worm in half will make two worms since both ends wriggle, but this actually kills the worm. By learning about all the decomposers, especially those hard-working worms, we can see how the tiniest critters can help compose a magnificent forest. Take a walk in a forest. Soon you may come across a downed log with plants growing out of it. Why are the plants growing out of a dead log? Why aren't they in the soil on the forest floor? Sometimes, just like a baby in a nursery, plants need help when they're tiny. That dead log with the plants growing on it is called a nurse log. But what exactly is going on? Forests have both old and young plants and animals of all types living there. And we know from the Decomposers video that everything dies and goes back to the soil. But it takes a while for a tree to decompose completely back to soil. By some estimates, a tree will decompose in the same amount of time that it lived. So, a 2,000-year-old redwood tree would take another 2,000 years to completely return to the soil. Living trees have a strong fiber in their wood called lignin. Lignin keeps them solid, strong, and upright. When a tree falls, tiny decomposers, mainly bacteria and fungi, break down the lignin, creating holes and niches in the bark of the downed tree, eventually filling with soil, moss, and small plants. This dark organic matter that forms when plant and animal matter decomposes and decays is called humus. Humus, collecting in the depressions in the nurse log, is the perfect place for a seed to sprout. The seed has everything it needs right there: food, moisture, and a safe place to grow. Those dead tree trunks are the nurseries for the baby trees and plants, providing everything tiny plants need to survive: nutrients, moisture, sunlight, and room to grow. Small seeds don't have much of a chance in a forest surrounded and shaded by huge trees and ground covered with ferns and mosses. However, if a seed is lucky enough to fall on a nurse log, one that is already starting to decompose, and it's sitting up a little higher than the ground, there's a good chance that seed will grow into an adult plant. Plants need light too, and when that nurse log fell over, there's a good chance it made some space in the canopy, letting more sunlight get through. In many ways, the nurse log helps the tiny forest plants grow. Nurse logs are an important stage in the life of a forest. Next time you're in a forest, look for the nurse logs. Notice the next generation of the forest growing there. They may be tiny now, but in a century or two, wow! Many people in the King Range region, and all over the world, use fire to heat their homes and to cook, so we know that fire can be useful, but it can also be scary. Fires can grow out of control, burning down whole forests. Buildings are lost. Entire towns have gone up in flames. The town of Paradise in the Sierra foothills was a tragic example. But it's important to know that fire is a necessary part of a forest's life. In fact, there are seeds like redbud that will not sprout until they have been heated by a fire to crack the shell. Redwood trees are especially designed to withstand fires because they do not have the flammable pitch like manzanita, fir, and pine trees. Redwoods have a very thick bark that protects the tree from the extreme damages of a fire, as long as it's not too intense. We learned from the nurse logs how difficult it can be for seedlings to grow in a forest, with a canopy of trees blocking sunlight, and with plants, leaves, needles, and limbs littering the forest floor, making it hard for seeds to find the soil they need. Fire can be useful to the forest, just like it can help the humans. In a healthy forest, fire can come through and burn the leaf litter and small plants on the ground, making nutrients available. Fire clears out diseased and dying trees and plants, providing space for sunlight to come through. For thousands of years, indigenous tribes used fire to manage forests. They wanted to be able to easily find the plants they valued for food, basket making, and medicine. They wanted to easily track the animals they hunted. A forest choked with a jumble of plants made that hard. For many generations, the native people used fire to help the forest stay healthy for all that lived there. If forests are maintained well, they can withstand and thrive with fire, even when a lightning strike starts a wildfire. Just about 200 years ago, Europeans arrived in California's North Coast region. 200 years is a blink of an eye for a forest and the native people that had been a part of the forest all along. To build cities and railroads, the forests were mined like gold, nearly cutting all down. And any kind of fire in the woods was seen as the enemy of human progress and profit. But without fire sweeping through every now and then, dead material and fallen trees stacked up for decades. All over the western United States, this created a very dangerous situation. Once a fire started, it could be very, very hard to put it out before it burned out of control, destroying not just the dead material on the floor, the decomposers used to build the soil, but all the living trees as well. And if a house or a town was nearby, well, you get the picture. Forest scientists and firefighters agree, fire, managed in the right way, with new knowledge learned from the old, can be used to make our forests safer and more productive. Every living thing can benefit from fire. from the worms and the mushrooms, to the nurse logs, to all the animals that need the forest to survive, including the human animal. Imagine the side of a volcano. Once the lava has cooled and hardened, it's just bare rock. Not good for much of anything to grow on. The first organisms to grow there are called lichens, and then mosses. They are the pioneers on the volcano. They can actually break apart the rock and add nutrients, making it possible for the side of that volcano to eventually support plants. Some of the first plants that will grow there are grasses. Their deep roots break down the rock and stabilize the soil even more. As the grasses die, the decomposers make even more soil that holds more nutrients for bigger plants. These larger plants also grow and die, and those decomposers continue to do their important job. The soil continues to get deeper and richer. Thanks to those hard-working worms, bigger and bigger plants take root, like hardwood trees, like oaks and maples. Eventually, the forest gets new residents, the biggest and the strongest plants in the forest. These are the trees that live the longest and the strongest. This is the forest climax community. When a forest is at its healthiest stage, it is at the climax. In a way, a forest is like a story. At the beginning of the story, we see the seed in the nurse log. The story builds and builds to the climax where every part of the story comes together. In our climax forest here on the North Coast, we find many trees, plants, and animals at their strongest and healthiest. And the biggest among them is the coast redwood, sempervirens, the tallest tree in the world. Along California's north coast, redwood trees are the most notable trees in the climax forest. They can live over 2,000 years and survive best when they grow pretty close together. In fact, the roots of the redwoods are very shallow. When a group of redwoods grow, their roots tangle amongst each other and hold each other in the ground. Even with many trees holding together at the roots, heavy winds can blow them down. A climax forest doesn't necessarily live forever. Severe fires, logging, blight, drought, road building, and development, these are all events that can change a forest, making it hard or impossible for the cycle to start again. Walking through a redwood forest, you often see a group of trees growing in a ring. A huge redwood used to grow in the middle of that ring. It might have been 3,000 years old when it fell over. Then the decomposers broke it down, and new trees sprouted up from the roots of the old tree, which were still alive underground. Kind of magical, right? Seeing that natural magic at work might be why these rings of trees are called fairy rings. So a forest starts on bare rock, and over the ages it grows and grows until it reaches the climax stage. Hopefully, the forest can continue to grow anew, from nurse logs and tiny seedlings to ancient trees living together in the forest community. From worms to the ancients, forests progress from one stage of life to the next, rebuilding for the future generations. The more we watch, listen, and learn from every living thing in the forest, the healthier we and our entire planet will be.